to break down the actual mechanics behind a truly iconic piece of poetry. We're looking at Bharat, which is this famously powerful patriotic work by the legendary poet Subramania Bharati. But look, we aren't just going to casually read it. We're really going to dissect it. We want to look closely at the anatomy of this tribute to see exactly how Bharati builds his homage, literally piece by piece. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever wondered what exactly makes a nation, well, peerless? I mean, it's an incredibly strong word, right? Without equal, totally unmatched. When a writer sets out to convince you that their homeland is absolutely unparalleled, how do they actually construct that argument? They can't just say, hey, it's the best, and leave it at that. They have to prove it to you. And that's exactly the central question we're answering today by analyzing this beautifully structured poem. So today, we're analyzing a really fascinating primary document. It's a snapshot of a textbook page. And I gotta say, I love working with sources like this because we get to play detective a bit. We don't just have Bharati's raw text here. We've got the reading for appreciation sections, a check your understanding exercise, and, my personal favorite, we even have real handwritten student margin notes. Let's be honest, we've all doodled or scribbled in our textbooks, but these little artifacts, they give us critical clues about how this poem is structurally engineered to be taught, understood, and truly felt by the reader. So let's start with Pillar 1, Praising Natural Beauty. Going through the textbook's exercises, it becomes incredibly clear that Bharati's poem rests heavily on three distinct foundational pillars. The very first pillar he establishes to ground the reader is the physical landscape itself. Just listen to the grandeur of these opening lines. The mighty Himavant is ours, there's no equal anywhere on earth. The generous Ganga is ours, which other river can match her grace? I really want you to feel the sweeping scale here. Notice his absolute certainty. He isn't just describing a mountain and a river, he's claiming them. He deliberately emphasizes the words mighty and generous, immediately giving powerful, almost human virtues to the physical geography. And this brilliantly illustrates the poet's strategic balance. On one side, we've got the mighty Himavant, the Himalayas, representing this unparalleled strength, right? Immovable and protective. Then, on the other side, we have the generous Ganga, representing unmatched grace. It's flowing, giving, alive. By pairing these two incredibly specific landmarks, Bharati isn't just handing us a geographical map, he's actually summarizing the entire physical soul of the nation as a perfect harmony of strength and grace. Which brings us to Pillar 2, a rich spiritual heritage. Once that physical foundation is securely laid, we move inward. Let's kind of quiet the noise for a second and look at how the poem's tone shifts to reflect this deep, resonant reverence. The text reads, "The sacred Upanishads are ours. What scriptures else to name with them?" Notice the deliberate, super careful choice of the word sacred here. He's establishing absolute spiritual supremacy. And he uses this fantastic rhetorical question, what scriptures else to name with them? He's essentially challenging the reader to even try and find an equal. It's a very confident, quiet power. Let's break down exactly what that spiritual heritage entails, according to our source. The poem doesn't just make vague, floaty statements about spirituality. It gives us specific historical milestones. We have the sacred Upanishads, laying the philosophical groundwork. Then we see references to the roots of Brahma knowledge, which shows an ongoing tradition of deep philosophical inquiry taking root. And finally, he points to the Buddha preaching his Dhamma here. Bharati is outlining this deep, diverse, and historical lineage of thought that evolved over millennia on this exact soil. Now let's look at Pillar 3, history, valor, and art. We've covered the land, we've covered the spirit, and now the pacing of the poem picks up rapidly as we focus on flesh and blood human action. Notice how he captures this element right here. Gallant warriors have lived here. Many a sage has sanctified this land. It's such a fantastic pairing. You have the physical, undeniable bravery of the warriors, placed right alongside the spiritual, quiet sanctification of the sages. Let's look a bit closer at these two archetypes. The poet pairs them to cover the absolute, complete spectrum of historical greatness. The gallant warriors represent action, defense, and the physical protection of the realm. Meanwhile, many a sage represent the sanctification, the wisdom, and the preservation of the nation's soul. You literally need both to build a truly peerless nation, and Bharati makes absolutely sure to honor both. Moving on to decoding the imagery, auditory mechanics. So we understand the geography, the spirituality, and the history, but how does the poet make us truly feel it? Well, we need to look at auditory imagery. This is descriptive language that invokes the sense of hearing to create a vivid mental picture. Doing this explainer, I love pointing this out because once you learn to spot it, poetry stops being just flat words on a page and suddenly becomes this incredibly rich, multisensory experience. The poet writes, "The divinest music has been heard here." When you read that line, you are forced to pause. You have to stop just reading the words and start actively listening to the poem's environment in your mind. You can almost hear the echoes of ancient chants or classical instruments drifting through the air. He's engaging your ears to make the history feel incredibly alive and resonant. Now, what's really interesting here, going back to that textbook page we started with, is this handwritten student note right in the margin. A student has actually physically written out, example 2, auditory imagery, pointing directly to that line about the divinest music. This proves that readers are actively taught to decode these literary mechanics. It's not just passive reading, it's an active investigation of exactly how the poet manipulates our senses to build their grand argument. Let's bring it all together, synthesizing the peerless nation. So, the crucial point is right here. Let's tie all these analytical threads together using the textbook's own built-in framework. This perfectly maps the check your understanding fill-in-the-blank exercise directly from our source document. Look at how beautifully structured this is. Under natural beauty, we've got the Himavant and Ganga praised as mighty and generous. Under spiritual heritage, we have the Upanishads and Brahma knowledge defined as sacred. And under historical greatness, we see the warriors and the Buddha, marked by their gallantry and the preaching of Dhamma. The textbook explicitly wants the student to recognize this exact matrix, because this right here, this is the blueprint of a nation's greatness. And this comprehensive synthesis is exactly what leads to the final triumphant conclusion of the poem. Because of the mountains, the scriptures, the warriors, and the music, Berardi can confidently declare, "Of hoary antiquity is Bharat, she's peerless, let's praise her." The antiquity, that deep, ancient history, is proven by the pillars we just decoded. She is peerless because she possesses the ultimate, totally unmatched combination of these exact traits. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. How does understanding these deliberate structural pillars change the way we read patriotic poetry today? When you see how carefully Subramania Bharati engineered this tribute, balancing strength with grace and action with wisdom, it makes you realize that great patriotic art isn't just blind emotion, right? It is a meticulously crafted argument. Next time you read a historical text or a tribute, I challenge you to look for the pillars holding it up. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep decoding.